Aurora and Prince Hector are having hot chocolate and cake. It's a cliche scene of courtship, really, right out of a fairy tale. The prince flirting with Aurora, discussing the ball from the other night, the two leaning in for a quick kiss. But then a pink glob of something falls from the ceiling into the prince's teacup, interrupting them. Quickly escalating from there, the walls and ceiling begin to melt. Hector, Aurora, and her friend/helper Plim becoming separated in the chaos. Aurora reaches a dead end and is almost buried alive in the rising pink goo until she digs her way up and out into the pouring rain. We see other characters emerging from within, a mouth, a nose. They're even falling out of the ears of someone lying on the ground. A giant, maybe? Most of these characters appear dismayed as the rain falls, fleeing to nearby blades of grass to seek shelter. Only Aurora seems to be looking up, horrified by something else. Maybe it's her friends falling from such great heights. Maybe it's the panic in everyone's eyes as they run, their home filling with the pink goo. Or maybe it's because she realizes they've just emerged from the decomposing body of a school-aged girl. This is how beautiful darkness starts. You're left floored by the discovery, morbidly curious over many things like how the young girl died and what was she doing before her death? Who is she? Who and what are these tiny creatures, and how did they end up living inside of a corpse? In our last video, we saw what happens when the tale of Sleeping Beauty becomes dark and when we allow a bit of reality to seep in and taint the make-believe, staining the promise of a happily ever after. This idea of twisting fairy tales into disturbing pieces of media led me to tonight's story. Considered a fusion of Thumbelina meets Lord of the Flies, Beautiful Darkness covers innocence, cruelty, childhood, and death. Lots and lots of death. This is your spoiler and second trigger warning because this story is right up there with the Midnight Scenes level of brutality, only illustrated in a whimsical art style that makes it all the more unnerving. So if you're ready, sit back, relax, get cozy, and let the nightmare begin. After our gruesome beginning, the sun rises and Aurora peeks out from underneath a tree root, beginning to search for her friends. She finds them but sees something shining near the deceased girl's backpack, who I'll reference as A for the rest of the video. A taller woman with red hair and a red dress is propped against the bag with a pair of scissors and cookies she found inside. This is Jane. And Aurora hints at being hungry and tries to make small talk with her, but Jane grabs a cookie, wraps her scissors around her waist using a band-aid from A's knee, and tells Aurora to help herself before leaving the group. Being so sweet and kind, Aurora gets to work sharing the remaining cookies with her friends, and we can see that they appear to be mostly children. There is one other woman in a coat holding a baby, but we'll come back to her later, and one very large childlike character that looks similar to a doll. Aurora seeks Plim's help in passing out food once she spots Prince Hector in the distance and goes to him. We will constantly be reminded throughout this story that a dead child lies nearby. One character, Gizmo, who acts far more feral than the others, clings to A's finger as the others try to pull her away, reluctant to leave A, even to eat. Aurora walks past, glad to see Hector alive, and Hector, well, he's starting to show his true colors immediately as he stares wistfully at a couple of other girls, barely listening to Aurora, and she seems to kind of notice, but ultimately says nothing about it. Spotting a group in distress, Aurora leaves Hector to save a very dramatic Zelly from a beetle that's not really messing with her, but oh, okay. Zelly and her group thank Aurora for saving them, showering her with praise, but now Zelly can't walk because she's hurt her ankle fleeing from the beetle. So Aurora uses a notebook to form a makeshift tent for her until she can move, and on the cover of this notebook is a name. Aurora. And when one of the characters question who that could be, our Aurora says, "I am," to which the character says, "Oh, all right." But we know that notebook belongs to the little girl lying in the grass nearby, the one who shares Aurora's name apparently. But again, we'll refer to her as A to avoid confusion from here on out. As the sun sets, Aurora asks the others to make more shelters while she looks around. Once she thinks she's alone, she says, That's enough for today. In the night, while the characters sleep, a cat attacks their camp, taking and presumably eating the mother we saw earlier. It's not clear if others were taken, but in the morning, the rest wake to find the camp destroyed and all of their food eaten. Aurora gets to work on rebuilding, and she and the others use A's hair for building houses and as jump rope. Meanwhile, we meet Timothy, who has stumbled across the baby we saw earlier in the comic. Now that his mother is gone, Timothy takes the baby to care for him while a mouse watches nearby. Days pass, A's body decomposing further, her skin blistering and covered with flies and maggots. Using nicknames here to differentiate, Doll and Tiny sit in one of A's hands while talking to a third character in a green dress. Green dress giggles over the maggots, how they tickle her feet as they writhe. Doll comments on how hungry she is, and Tiny wonders if Aurora will find food for them today. We learn that they used to eat mushrooms from the forest, but unfortunately, many were deadly and killed off a lot of the group over time. They need to find things to eat, but they don't want to be like Gizmo, the feral girl who is eating maggots nearby. Doll's hunger grows, and without warning, she grabs Tiny and eats her whole. "Wanna play?" she asks Green Dress. "Look, it's like I'm pregnant." Instead of being appalled by Doll's actions, Green Dress laughs, places her hand on Doll's belly, and comments, "Oh, I can feel the baby move." "Call me Mommy," Doll says in response. Up until this point, the deaths of the characters off-screen, except for A, have been unfortunate, but the consequences of nature and naivety. The woman eaten by a predator in the forest, the many accidents of eating poisonous mushrooms. But Doll chooses to eat her friend, if you can even call them friends now. It was deliberate, though, not necessarily filled with malice, and the action has a pretty obvious consequence. You eat your friend, and they die. Yet neither living character seems to care, and this uncaring attitude over death and destruction will unfortunately continue. Meanwhile, Aurora is visiting the same mouse that watched Timothy and the baby, only now he seems to be wearing a coat, the same one the baby's mother wore before she was killed. He communicates with a series of squeaks, but Aurora seems to either understand him or perhaps is just playing pretend. Either way, she declines to eat the mud offered to her, but says she'll gladly take some berries back home with her. Leaving the mouse, she offers the berries to a few nearby friends, telling them she thinks the mouse will help them find more, and they delight in it, telling Aurora that she's the best, impressed that she can speak mouse language. Elsewhere, Meanie climbs into a bird's nest, hoping to trick a mother bird into feeding her worms, and it works, but the bird's beak impales her, blood pouring from her mouth. Her sisters, Miney and Mo, show no empathy, instead commenting that her idea was a bad one. Later that night, we see Meanie moaning and walking aimlessly in the dark, and it can be assumed that she dies as well. We've also got a kid displaying psychopathic behavior and pulling the legs off of a ladybug that's the size of a large dog when compared to him. He has other children join in, but changes his mind shortly after to go hunt for pebbles with his friends. While Aurora and a few others are gathering rainwater, she comes across Timothy and the baby, introducing herself as they haven't met officially. Aurora invites Timothy back to the camp, but the others scare her because she's different and she feels like something bad could happen if she were to join. Aurora promises Timothy that nothing bad will ever happen again and that she's doing everything she can to make things like they were before. But it's a promise that we know she won't be able to keep at this rate, though she seems certain of it. More deaths ensue as we learn a girl named Natalie drowned in a hole that filled with water overnight, and while Sally here isn't dead yet, that infection is looking pretty nasty. Hector and his hunting party meet up with Aurora, but he's not exactly a skilled or motivated hunter, especially since Aurora seems to be the primary person organizing the group and gathering food. He flirts with her just enough to sway her affection before running off and taking a break as soon as he gets a blister from swinging his sword around. The rest of the group has taken to relocating A's backpack, and Plim seems to be acting really responsible, but this little face here just makes me think that he's up to no good. Gizmo climbs into the back of A's rotting head, returning home in a weird, twisted way, while Aurora enters Zelly's home and her entourage are busy gluing fly wings onto a gown for her. Zelly comments on how dark her home is, and when Aurora offers to install windows the next day, Zelly isn't grateful at all. Instead, she asks if Aurora could do it sooner, then mocks her in front of her friends. Plim's selfless attitude before was definitely an act, as he tricks Sally and steals her food. Mighty gets eaten alive by ants, and Aurora and the mouse go to bathe in a puddle. However, something startles the mouse and a nearby bird. It's a man, a tall, looming silhouette that almost crushes Aurora, and he's the only other life-size character we see in this story. She survives, luckily, while Jane watches in a nearby tree as the man walks away, unaware of his close encounter. Want some more deaths? Well, here you go anyways. This mushroom-headed kid tries to protect Plim by luring a wasp away, only to be stabbed by it off-screen. Mo gets carried away by a kite, and again, their nearby companions could care less. There's no remorse, no feelings of guilt. Even the victims don't seem to take their looming death seriously. Aurora is the only one that seems to have the slightest sense of self-preservation. She's building a hut made of sticks and grass while talking to Sally. She's making the house for Hector and says that everyone needs a house, that it's important. However, a fly lands nearby and Aurora becomes fixated on it. "I don't like that fly," she says as her eyes begin to fill with tears. "Why are you crying?" Sally asked. But Aurora says she doesn't know. Instead, she runs away, saying that she doesn't feel good, crying the whole time as she buries her head in a piece of cloth. She's crying into A's dress, her body completely covered in flies. Not much is ever revealed about A. We can guess a few things, sure, but so far our biggest clues are the name on her notebook, and now this dream, or perhaps a memory. In it, A is lying on the ground, the leaves falling around her in the oranges and reds of autumn. She's sleeping, or at least pretending to, but something causes her to look up and around her. Maybe she's bored. Maybe she hears something. Either way, she dusts herself off and walks farther into the woods. Then, the screaming begins. At first, I thought it was A screaming, a clue to her cause of death, but then the scream is shown to be coming from Gizmo, the one hiding inside her head in the present. She's startled over what she calls a nightmare, relieved that it was only a dream as she peers out of A's skull, the fall leaves the same as those of the dream. Was Gizmo relieved to be awake because the nightmare showed a frightening depiction of A's death, or was she relieved because the girl remains dead, her home undisturbed? I don't really know, but I do know that Hector is back to flirting with every girl in sight, and Doll has died. She's been stuck in a hole for 6 days, trying to go inside to have tea with 2 others named Nadine and Pippa, who are probably also dead if they've been stuck on the other side of the hole this entire time. Aurora is gathering mushrooms and comes across Jane attempting to capture a robin. Aurora asks how she can help, and Jane, holding the robin down, instructs her to grab the scissors and clip its wings. Aurora seems reluctant, but ultimately does so, and Jane says she'll finish taming the robin once it's tired of hopping around. "You're leaving for good this time, aren't you?" she asks Jane. "The others are lucky to have you, you know," Jane replies, walking away again. Aurora then decides to throw a party for everyone and the forest animals, hoping they'll all learn to get along with each other because that's gone so well so far. She's given an invitation to Timothy, who is on her way to the party with the baby, but is stopped by Zelly and her friends. "You're not going to the party like that, are you?" Zelly says. "You look like a beggar. Here, I'll do your hair." She forces Timothy to sit while she brushes her hair, and the others note how cute the baby is, asking Zelly if they can have him. Zelly says, "Sure, sweetie pie, he's all yours," completely disregarding the fact that you can't just give away someone's baby. She then tries to brush the other side of Timothy's hair, but Timothy tries to flee, and in doing so, Zelly yanks her hair back, revealing that Timothy is missing an eye. "And we thought you were normal," Zelly says in disgust, the others looking down on Timothy in a similar fashion. "I'm a monster. I don't deserve to live here with all of you," Timothy exclaims, and Zelly agrees. She instructs the others to grab the pencil case so that they can bury Timothy. "Lie down inside and you'll be dead," she says. Timothy hesitates but agrees, and the others get to work on burying her alive. Zelly pretends to pray, then ends the ceremony, leaving Timothy in the ground and the baby all alone next to the pile of dirt. Aurora is unaware of what's going on. She's busy pulling animals to the party. She notices that many of her guests haven't arrived. Where is Plim, Hector, and Timothy? They promised they'd go. She wants to wait a little longer, but the animals have grown impatient. They start to destroy the party, eating the food she sets out, a bird stealing someone in a red coat in the process. The next day, she finds Zelly in a long, elegant dress. Zelly asks how the party planning is going, to which Aurora replies that the party was yesterday, but Zelly says her invitation wasn't exactly clear about the date. She asks Aurora to confide in her, and she does, describing her frustration over the animals who acted like the beasts they are and her friends that didn't show. Zelly feigns interest in Aurora's situation, even offering to go and talk to Hector. Aurora thanks her, telling her she's very kind, to which Zelly says, "Don't thank me yet. You never know with men." But we know with Hector, that dirty little grubby worm, we also know that Zelly is pure evil and can't be trusted, but Aurora doesn't know, at least not yet. She waits for Zelly to return and waits and waits. Eventually, some of the group start running in the same direction, excited that something is happening. Aurora runs after them, curious and excited as well, but is shocked to learn that the event everyone knew about, except for her, is Zelly and Hector's wedding. Her party ruined, her love interest a liar and a cheat, the person she confided in a backstabber, and the most sincere friend she had now gone. Aurora sits disheveled and broken. 3 boys bring her the mouse in the coat, courtesy of Zelly, who said Aurora would want to get even with him for destroying her party. We see her kindness ebbing away, her face hardening. Aurora is changing. Or maybe she's letting go, giving in to the selfishness she's always pushed down to care for others. She calls the mouse bad, the others agreed and taunting him as well. All the while, the mouse lays a berry at her feet, almost as a gift or an apology. But Aurora doesn't care anymore. She calls him wicked and dirty, and then she gouges out his eyes with her fingers. The mouse screams in terror and pain, running away while the others chase after him. They leave Aurora behind, calling her names, and once they catch up to the mouse, they call the rest of the group in. And then they eat the mouse completely raw. One brings the heart back to Zelly, and once the crowd is gone, Aurora sits down to eat the remains. Zelly and Hector are lounging near a stream until Hector gives a weird suggestive look to another girl and Zelly's ribbon falls into the water. She forces Hector to retrieve it for her, and he's worried he'll fall in because he can't swim. He doesn't have to worry about that for long because a frog eats him and liquefies part of his body. "Does he at least have my ribbon?" Zelly wonders while the frog vomits up her groom. She holds a second burial, this time for Hector, but they use the same pencil case. Clem says he emptied it, and aside from some small scratches on the inside, it's like new. The baby is also gone, and we can assume that he has also perished. Zelly pretends to grieve Hector's loss, even managing a bunch of tears while Aurora watches in the shadows. She's made a cloak from the fur and skin of the mouse and sails down the stream on a paper boat, leaving the cruelty and the betrayal behind. Eventually, she reaches a small cabin in the woods and spots Jane's robin tied to a rock. Jane sees her and asks what she's doing, to which Aurora replies that she doesn't live with the others anymore. Jane offers her a place to stay, but she warns that she mustn't make a sound because he's right next door. Aurora peers out of a small hole and sees the man from before, the one that almost stepped on her. He's tinkering with something at his desk, a cup of hot coffee and a gun beside him. Fall turns to winter, and we learn that Aurora has chosen to stay with Jane in the shed by the cabin. She's cooked a meal for them both, but Jane is displeased because Aurora got the ingredients from inside the house. "That man is dangerous," she warns Aurora, "and he stinks worse than anything. The sooner they find another place, the better." Later that night, while she sleeps, Aurora slips on her mouse cloak and enters the house. She climbs onto the sleeping man and cuts a piece of his hair with a razor blade. Then she scurries past a broken doll and empty bottles, up a shelf and into an old cuckoo clock. She's turned it into a little clubhouse of sorts, and once inside, she pulls out the lock of hair. She decides she likes the smell. It doesn't stink to her. It's strong, but sweet too. It smells like honey. She then watches the man while he continues to sleep. Back at A's body, Gizmo is cold and shivering. She walks until she returns to the skull, and now truly the only one who never left A. Her corpse now covered in a thick layer of snow. This is another potential death not shown, but it's easy to assume Gizmo freezes to death soon after. Back at the cabin, the man is awake and busy skinning a rabbit. Jane is sharpening a spear just as Aurora runs into their home, urging Jane to come outside. She's seen something nearby coming toward them. It's Zelly and her friends, and the idiots are singing. Jane, worried they'll expose her and Aurora with their noise, hops onto the robin and tries to ward them off. She tells Aurora to wait for her, but eventually Aurora gives in to the worry and follows after. As she rounds the corner, she sees Zelly riding Jane's robin. The others behind her, but no Jane. When Aurora asks where she is, Plym says Jane don't know her, as they all enter Aurora's home. She stands in the snow, tears falling down as she realizes her final friend has been murdered. The group is quick to make themselves comfortable, to take over everything, and to begin wandering inside the man's home. Aurora tells them the giant lives here and he's very mean, but no one seems to care.
"You have to call her princess now," Lunette says. "It's best to keep quiet or they'll make you miserable. But I'll be your friend."
Zelly stares at the broken doll as Plym warns that the giant is coming. But she's already decided. This will be a very nice house. She even has her own giant now. Later that night, the group sits and eats dinner by candlelight as Aurora finally returns.
"You're too late. There's nothing left. That'll teach you."
She tells Aurora she must do what she's told if she wants to continue living with them all, and she can start by washing and drying everyone's boots. Lunette offers to help Aurora, but she runs to Plym instead. He can't tell Zelly, but she has a secret place she wants to share with Plym. He, of course, goes directly to Zelly and leads the way, excited to show her the new location. Everyone follows, and Zelly likes how much warmer it is there. Plym reveals Aurora was hiding the spot, and Zelly says,
"That wasn't very smart, but you've never been too bright, have you? That's your problem, Aurora. I'll think of a punishment to set an example."
Lunette reaches a hand out to Aurora in comfort, but quickly runs off when Zelly demands a massage from her. And Aurora, alone at last and standing at the entrance, closes and locks the door, trapping everyone but her inside of the man's oven. She waits and watches as he enters the house, loads the stove with firewood, then lights it on fire. While he's occupied making dinner, she climbs back into the cuckoo clock. She's smiling as she watches him, the pot of food simmering on the stove, he back to tinkering at his desk. She says,
"I'll need to rebuild my little nest. It's all right. I've got plenty of time. That meal you're making for us smells good. My sweet prince."
Did anyone else find this story as messed up as I did? There is a lot to unpack, and like most everything I cover, there are no clear answers to many of my questions, which can be frustrating but also fun because there's so many plausible theories out there on this story. For starters, who are these tiny little people and how did they come to live inside of A? I've seen them referenced as fairies and pixies in certain reviews, but I haven't found any definitive terms from the authors and artist. Marie Pompoy, who first had this idea for Beautiful Darkness and who is one half of the pen name Kerascoët, hasn't technically said what they are. Well, at least in the reviews that I've read that are in English. If you happen to speak French and have seen anything differently though, please let me know. Even Fabien Vehlmann, who wrote most of the graphic novel, referred to them as little puppets or creatures, going so far as to say he doesn't exactly know what to call them. But the term puppet is quite interesting because it literally means a small model, usually of a person or animal, that is controlled by a puppeteer. And we know from the notebook that Aurora and A share the same name. They even look similar with fair skin and long blonde hair, but then again, Zelly and even Gizmo resemble A in a way. The most popular theory I've seen is that every puppet is a facet of the true Aurora's personality or psyche, most of them childish with a few in that transitioning period of childhood to adolescence, becoming more aware and forming concrete identities of their own. And I think this theory makes a lot of sense, though I thought maybe not all of these characters are direct pieces of A's personality, but also a combination of childhood memories personified and fragmented. I think the trio are primary representations of who A was before her death. Aurora, who shares the same name, the closest to A's true self. Kind, naive, helpful, and a bit of a romantic, fantasizing about fairy tales and happily ever afters with a prince. Zelly is the over-dramatization of selfishness and the lack of empathy that children often have, as empathy develops throughout childhood and adolescence. Then that would make Gizmo the more primitive aspect of A's personality, the unconscious drive to survive, to give in to impulses, basic needs, and desires. Perhaps that survival instinct and fear were the parts of A's personality that were most present during her final moments as she struggled to make sense of what was happening to her, trying to fight her impending death. In a way, Gizmo seems to reflect A's id, the unconscious, primitive, illogical, irrational, and fantasy-oriented component of one's personality, according to Freud anyway. The id is amoral, so neither right nor wrong, and it's only concerned with fulfilling instinctive needs. Gizmo only cares about protecting herself, her home, and ensuring she has food. Going the way of the psychoanalytic theory, Aurora would play the role of A's ego. The ego's goal is to satisfy the id's demands in a safe and socially acceptable way, so rationing cookies instead of eating maggots, building homes instead of dwelling in skulls, trying to be a good person to be accepted and loved by everyone because it's the socially acceptable thing to do, at least to a child. Then that would make Zelly the superego personified, and usually the superego's job is to be the moral compass for the ego, our conscience guided by the internalized voices of authority figures in our lives like parents, teachers, anybody we think would judge us. It creates this illogical ideal self that we think we ought to be, though it's unrealistic to achieve, almost like an angelic character. And I know what you're thinking. Zelly is far from angelic, far from perfect and morally sound, but when someone's superego is weak or underdeveloped, that person may display antisocial behaviors and have weak morals. And we see a lot of those antisocial behaviors in Zelly specifically. Bullying, lying, aggression toward others, and narcissistic tendencies like feelings of superiority, entitlement, and a lack of empathy. And, murder. And this could also suggest that A's main authoritative figures, like a parent, also had selfish and cruel personalities, resulting in her beginning to develop weaker morals that she observed in childhood. As for the rest of the puppets, I thought they reflected A's past memories or experiences prior to death. Almost all the characters were children with the same mentality and playful, though selfish nature, and I could see some of them representing friends or bullies at school, people she saw in passing throughout her day-to-day life, and maybe even family members. I found it interesting that there were no adult male characters in the group and only 2 female adult puppets. The first was the mother, who was taken by the cat, leaving her baby behind, and I kind of wondered if this paralleled A's childhood. Was her mother not present in her life? Did she die or even abandon A as a baby? Jane, of course, was the other adult female who also left Aurora behind, but then formed a bond with her later on in the story, only to be killed off by Zelly and her group, leaving Aurora alone once again. As A's body decomposed further, the memories of who she was and who she cared about or disliked faded away with each death alongside her. Gizmo and Zelly's deaths caused an integration of their unique personalities within Aurora, allowing the true Aurora, our A, to be reborn in a way. No more memories from her past life or death, but a combination of id, ego, and superego, with Zelly and Gizmo's traits now becoming more dominant in Aurora after deciding to harm the mouse and murder the rest of the group for survival. Freud's theory suggests that a balanced personality occurs when our ego manages our desires and moral standards in real life effectively, but Aurora allowed the desires and instincts of the id to take over, adopted some of the more immoral principles of the superego. If this were the case, then I wonder if A always had a personality like this deep down, or if Aurora is the personality she would have developed in the future. And wouldn't it also be interesting if the puppets were her final thoughts or moments before her death, a long drawn-out game of make-believe as she wandered lost in the forest, collecting stones, playing with bugs, and having tea parties with the animals until she succumbed to the elements. The puppets could have all come from her imagination and were then left behind once she died. And that leads me to my next question, actually. How did A die anyway? Many have theorized the man in the cabin killed her. He's the only other life-size character in this story, unless this silhouette was someone else, but I highly doubt it. He was very close to A's body while Aurora was bathing, and still not very far away in the cabin when you consider how quickly Aurora arrived in her tiny boat. Readers have studied the images of A, trying to find any clues as to how she died, but there are no physical marks or evidence on her body that we can see. No strangulation marks or bullet wounds that could potentially reference the gun on the man's table. No signs of blunt force trauma or signs of A fighting back an attacker. At first, she appears to be sleeping peacefully, like Gizmo's flashback or dream. But in the dream, it was autumn, yet our story starts in the spring, A already dead and beginning to decompose. Depending on temperature and other factors, internal decay begins to occur immediately after death up to 3 days, so it seems our story begins not long after A died. I don't know that Gizmo's dream is the most reliable clue as far as time frame goes, but if the events of the dream were at least accurate, then it seems that A was playing Sleeping Beauty shortly before dying. If you watched my last video, you might know that Talia was just one name for Sleeping Beauty, while Briar Rose and Aurora have been used in other adaptations. Perhaps she was waiting for a real-life prince to wake her, and one never came. Or maybe he did. When Aurora and the mouse are eating together, you can see a variety of objects he's collected and stored in his den, and I couldn't help but notice this syringe. Could she have possibly been drugged, left lying in the grass like the game she once played? Vehlmann isn't giving any hints on the matter. In a 2014 Drawn and Quarterly interview, he states, "What's interesting is that we never explain why this little girl died in the story, but you can be sure that a majority of the readers will think there was a murder. But we never say that. Never. And we'll never say that it's a murder. Some of the readers may be disappointed by the end because there is no explanation. All we can say is that there is a corpse in the forest. Is she real or is she not is a question. Is there a link between that girl and the man in the forest? It's a good question, but there is no answer." So even A's very existence is questioned with this statement, and the man in the woods may not be related to her death at all. A lot of people point to the symbolism of the broken doll in his cabin, suggesting it could be evidence A was brought there once or even lived there. I truly don't know if the man killed A, if Aurora and the others are a part of her, and I'm not supposed to know. But when Aurora called the man her sweet prince, it felt like she was thanking him in a way for saving her life, like all princes are supposed to do. Was it thanks for freeing her from A? From providing a way for her to end the others, becoming her truest self? Does her affection for the man stem somewhere from within A's memories or experiences? Vehlmann and Kerascoët seem to be telling us it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how A lived or how she died, because death just is, and life can be cruel no matter how old you are. There are incredibly dark parts of the world that are like this every day, but in nature, death just is. Vehlmann said that when a rabbit dies in the woods, it's just a corpse, and then it's the cycle of life repeating itself and everything is fine. But when you replace that rabbit with an innocent little girl, it feels wrong, immoral, evil even. So naturally, we look for answers to explain the origins of this evil, and I don't know about you, but I found myself incredibly drawn to A and her story, and far more empathetic to her death and treatment than many of the other characters. I felt uneasy as they used her body for survival, saddened as we watched her decompose with the seasons. We have a better sense of who Jane, Timothy, and Zelly are, so we feel something for their deaths, whether sadness or whatever you might have felt for Zelly. But the rest of the group is mentioned and shown briefly before they're killed off, and I think this quick introduction is meant to evoke a sense of apathy from us, to place us in the same mindset as the uncaring, selfish, and childlike nature of the puppets. Gizmo's name isn't even mentioned in the comic. I had to find her name as well as Meanie, Miney, Mo, Lunette, and Sally's from Kerascoët's Instagram page, and most of the other characters remain nameless. But though we don't know who A is, we know her name, Aurora. We know that she at least appears innocent, unlike the puppets who were cruel and selfish. We assume she's innocent and kind like every princess in the fairy tales, and her death makes us care. But the truth is, at least in this perspective, death just is. It doesn't matter who's kind or sweet or socially accepted. It comes for us all. Puppet Aurora subverts our expectations for A, showing us what happens when princesses no longer play nice. Her naivety and kindness are borderline cliche at first, but as she breaks, she becomes more human to us. And we relate to her a bit more, maybe as a result of our unconscious thoughts and desires. Maybe it's because it resonates with that bit of darkness within us all. As Vehlmann said, this dark view of the world is only one perspective, and while nothing may seem to matter in this story, it does because we want it to. I wanted A's death to mean something, so I theorized and thought and made connections to things I probably wouldn't have otherwise, giving her death some kind of meaning to me, and making connections with others who care about the story as well. Humans crave order and answers in the uncertainty, so whether you choose to see death as a nightmare, a transformation, a change, or something beautiful, you've given it meaning. And maybe that's the beauty of the darkness. Horror, with all its bleakness, reminds us of what we fear and care for. In the end, it's our need to make meaning that gives both life and death their depth, and if it feels like there's no meaning, no purpose, then you have the choice to create one. But as always, I want to know what you think. Share your headcanons and theories on this one, because I truly think there's no wrong answer here. Thank you so much for watching. Here's another one of my videos. And as always, may your nightmares be strangely cozy.